Good evening, committee members. This is Alex Nguyen, the city manager. I will be making this presentation to all three committees today. So this is regarding the scoping of the upcoming discussion about the city council's 2021 to 2025 5-year priority setting. This presentation follows the January 5th report at the City Council about the same topic. And this is simply our next step. And here's as a reminder, the time frame. So we're coming to committees here in January for the scoping process, which is basically the kickoff. And then based on what the City Council committees scope today, we will take that information and formulate survey that we will conduct in our community and bring back the findings in time for the council's special workshop next month in February, where the council, based on what the committee scope today, what the public survey input provides, and what staff's recommendations are, we can then have a discussion at the council workshop later in February. And based on the outcome, our goal is to have the council actually select the 5-year priorities at that special workshop, and then we'll bring it back for adoption at a March council meeting. So here's what we're recommending. Now, the proposed framework is to focus on these three areas. Most importantly is to turn City Hall into a high functioning organization. We have a lot of great talent and we have a lot of good programs and services in place, but we also have a lot of gaps, and we need to continue to improve this organization in order to provide the services and programs that our community needs and deserves. And of course, that is the next area to focus on is restoration of all those programs, and hopefully where we are able to and where we find the greatest need to also add services and programs. And finally, we should, given the investment that the voters have provided us with the passage of Measure E, we should look to add a few major investments that help make the city a better place for all of us. So some more food for thought. So setting up priorities for 5 years is should not result in a laundry list of everyone's wishes and desires from all corners of the city. It really needs to focus on what we can do and what we aspire to do in the next 5 years, of course, with a mind's eye out towards the near future beyond that. So, some things here that we suggest people keep their focus on. Keep it aspirational within the 5-year window and have your choices be both achievable but also measurable. Next, we want to match our resources to whatever those priorities end up being, whether it's existing resources or we need to add new resources. Then we need to make sure that it's measurable, right? So, whatever our priority is, or the goal, or the task, or the project, we should have metrics attached to it so that we can get a sense of progress being made throughout the 5-year period, which means we also have to have a timeline. And that timeline hopefully will fit in the next 5 years. Now, the council may decide on something or some project that may take more than 5 years, but we should still have the timeline, the overall timeline for it, and specifically what parts of that timeline fit in this 5-year window, again, so that we can measure and make sure we stay on track. We recommend that the priorities for this 5-year period should also align with what we've been discussing with the public regarding Measure E investments, and the fact that Measure E should go toward restorations first and foremost prior to any enhancements. And then obviously it should be reflected in the upcoming budget as well as the ones after this next one. So there is the general framework and food for thought. Uh, Again, three main categories to keep in mind. Six areas here to think through in terms of as you select your priorities, how we then present them and what they are, how long they take, what resources are necessary, what is the actual schedule, what do you expect, um, throughout that schedule, but what really should the council and the public expect to receive from the investments in each category. Now, as a reminder, here are uh, the categories of spending and investments that we had public conversations about when we were choosing to put Measure E on the ballot before the voters. So here are the primary areas. I'll cover the headings real quick, and then we'll get into the details in the following slides. And recall that this was first published back in September of 2020. So the headings are maintain 911 safety and emergency response, restore landscaping services, secure long term financial sustainability, keeping public places clean and safe, retaining and attracting local businesses and jobs, restoring youth and senior programs, restoring city infrastructure, addressing homelessness, and of course, efforts on recovery and relief. So here is what we are recommending in terms of the uh, priority areas. Now, in the last go round for the 2016 through 2020, there were four areas, and those are the ones here that are listed as existing, and we're adding one new one. So they are organizational effectiveness, quality of life, economic development, public safety, and infrastructure and natural resources. So the executive team led by our police chief and fire chief, have strongly recommended adding public safety as its own category, and we will be able to discuss that further as we go along. So, organizational effectiveness. What we want to do here, again, these are our recommendations. The council, as the policy setting body, can tweak this any way it sees fit. What we recommend is to reinforce, stabilize, improve, and strengthen the organizational foundation of the city in order to build a modern, high functioning city government that effectively and efficiently supports the operating departments in providing high quality services and programs for our residents and businesses. And here you can see we pulled out the categories from the Measure E bucket of investments that fit best under each of the priority areas. So here we have securing long-term financial sustainability, and you can see the three bullet points here, talking about getting our reserves back to sufficient levels, continue to improve our financial accountability, as well as transparency, and I'll add to that obviously highest levels of financial management, and also to get the city's ability to be self-sufficient and respond quickly and efficiently to natural disasters such as earthquakes and fires. So, part of those abilities also require having a healthy budget and financial reserves. The next area is quality of life. And of course, we want to restore as well as increase quality services and programs that enrich Oxnard's diverse community, promotes safe neighborhoods, encourages community engagement, and supports our residents in their efforts to improve their quality of life. And these two Measure E buckets are put into this category. So restoring youth programs and senior programs, right? So we know we need to do that because they've been cut so radically over the last 5 years. And the council prior years have already approved the new senior center, which is sorely needed based on our demographics. So we're prepared to proceed with that to build a new senior center. And I also want to say that that effort should include renovating the existing senior centers and I would say also restoring the one that was in the Colonia neighborhood. And we're going to need to renovate the multi-service center at Camino del Sol. Good news is the council has made some decisions regarding cannabis funding that will be targeted for that effort. So that should take a big chunk out of that budget, and then ultimately to reopen the Carnegie Art Museum. And I look forward to having detailed discussions, especially on the Carnegie Art Museum, as we proceed. Uh, Addressing homelessness, we have made tremendous progress over the last few years, but we need to keep after it. So there, we want to, of course, continue to increase our ability to address homelessness. We need to uh, continue to help families and residents in transition, as well as continue to fund various enforcement programs and outreach programs to minimize the impacts of the homeless situation in all of our public areas. Next is economic development, and this is where I am proposing that we make a pretty drastic change in terms of focus. So, what I'd like to do in the next 5 years is recommend to the council that we spend at least half, if not a little bit more, of our economic development efforts on focusing on retention and expansion of businesses that are already here in Oxnard. And we want to do that primarily by increasing the skills and the employability of our residents here in Oxnard. So to improve or increase or enhance, however you want to put it, the local workforce so that they are qualified and eligible and can apply for and win jobs in the many, many businesses that are already here in Oxnard, many of whom pay well and provide health benefits. It would do us well to connect our residents to those businesses that benefits both sides of that equation. We, of course, will continue to invite new business investments wherever we have an opportunity. And we also need to target site based redevelopment opportunities. So we will talk about that in detail, well, all of this really in detail as we get through this process. So, a couple examples here would be, for example, ultimately the creation of the Zocalo in South Oxnard that will be revitalizing the Saviors Business District. And then here downtown, renovating 4th Street between the transit center and the downtown, which would go a long ways to inviting new investment here in the downtown. Next is public safety, and this is again led by our two chiefs. We really want to restore both departments, but also to modernize the delivery of their services to our community in order to maintain a safe city and a healthy city, and ultimately to strengthen the community. Now, these buckets from Measure E include maintaining 911 safety and emergency response, but also recovery and relief. And throughout this pandemic, it is very evident to us here in Oxnard, but frankly, probably all cities and communities, that during this time we're really one incident away from an all-out disaster. Just I can't, and it does keep me up at night. Just you know, hoping that we don't have something like an earthquake, like a serious earthquake, in the middle of this pandemic. And as I record this for the committees, I can't help but think about the earthquake that just hit Indonesia several days ago, and there's going to be very serious fallout from that. But couple that with COVID-19, and it's going to be one of the worst aftermaths of an earthquake of that scale in a community like that. So we should continue to keep an eye on their recovery efforts. And then, of course, keeping public spaces clean and safe. And that's an effort that, while has public safety implications, that's also going to include continued work with the homeless population and also improving how parks delivers their maintenance service as well. So obviously all of these things are interrelated in our effort to create and to continue to improve and create a great city and community for everyone. And then finally, infrastructure and natural resources. We need to put together fresh plans to improve our roads, our various utilities, our parks, trees, water supply, and of course, other natural resources, effective planning, prioritizing those plans in a rational order that makes sense, but is also equitable across neighborhoods so that there's no appearance of favoring any single part of the city, as well as efficiently using our funding that we have, whether it's current revenue or bonds that we need to take out for major capital improvement projects that last generations and generations into the future. So those are the primary categories. So let me go back and frame it here. So what we ask of each committee today is through the subject area expertise lens of each committee to talk about these areas. So we don't need each committee to talk about all five of these, right? So we certainly want finance and governance to talk about the top one, organizational effectiveness, public safety, cultural services, economic development and housing, definitely quality of life, economic development and public safety. And then, so that's actually very busy for that committee today. And then public works and transportation to discuss through its lens, infrastructure, natural resources categories. And again, we offer this as a starting point, and we strongly recommend that we do our best to keep within this menu because we don't have unlimited money. Even with Measure E, our funds will still be limited in terms of what we can do, how much, and how fast. So, in the end of this, when we get to the council special workshop, where we will ask the council members, again, based on what each committee scopes today, and based on what our community survey brings back, which we will obviously publish everything and present to the council members. We hope to then take these buckets of investments, put them not only with the appropriate categories, but then hopefully prioritize them based on, again, um, how much we can afford to invest in each. Obviously, you invest a lot here, that's a lot less to invest everywhere else, and vice versa. So, everywhere where the dollar numbers go up, it's going to have to go. An equivalent amount will go down, elsewhere, whether it's from one or more categories. So it's just obviously the council's ultimate balancing act. We don't expect to when we do the council priorities special workshop to get it to the level of detail of the budget. That comes during the budgeting process, which would pretty much start in March, April, and May. But we have to get the priorities set, and that will then inform the budget. So one step at a time in the proper sequence, and this should ultimately flow pretty smoothly in terms of ultimately informing next year's annual budget. So with that, it is the end of my presentation, and I trust that everyone will have watched this prior to the committee meetings on January 26th. Unfortunately, you will have to have memorized all of this because at the meeting, I will and the assistant city manager and deputy city manager will be prepared to answer questions you may have, and we will also have department directors with to the respective committees be available for questions and answers as well. Thank you very much for watching/listening, and I'll look forward to seeing you live and, well, yeah, live in real time, if not in person, at the committee meetings. Thank you.